Aloha, boys and girls. Miss Kai here. So, today in our art lesson, we are going to be doing a tree of life painting. We are going to be painting using Sharpie markers and watercolors. Can you see all the different line patterns inside my tree? This tree of life is something that I painted because I want people to ask me when they look at my art, wow, that's an interesting looking tree. Why did you paint that? And I can tell them about Arbor Day. And that is a holiday that celebrates trees, and people usually get together on Arbor Day and they plant trees and they do community cleanups and they just take care of the earth. It's kind of like an Earth Day, but it's celebrating trees. So that is an example of how art can be useful and it can help start conversations about things. Yes, art is beautiful, but art can also be useful. Do you agree, boys and girls? Well, I hope you enjoy this lesson, and I can't wait to see all of your beautiful trees. Aloha! All right, boys and girls, so today we are going to be doing an art piece, and it's going to be called The Tree of Life. So we are looking at the artist, and if you looked at slide 1 of your seesaw, there was The Tree of Life by Gustav Klimt, and he made it in 1905. So that was more than 100 years ago he drew that Tree of Life. And it has a bunch of different lines in it and shapes in it. And so we're going to be trying to do something kind of like that. Now, when we do an art piece, okay, so when you do art, one, it can be beautiful, right? We can appreciate it and it's beautiful. We can appreciate that it's art. But art can also be useful. So this piece of art is going to also make people think about Arbor Day. And Arbor Day is the day that we plant trees or, we clean up litter. We're taking care of the trees that take care of us. Okay, so that's what we're thinking about when we do this art piece. We're going to need some Sharpie markers. So I have, three kind. I have a big Sharpie marker. I have my medium Sharpie marker. And then I have my fine point. Okay, if you only have one kind of Sharpie marker, that's okay. But I just think it's easier because I can draw my lines, my fine lines, using this one. And I can draw the big lines for the tree using this, my big outline, right? Okay. You're also going to need your watercolor palette. Okay, so when we use watercolor, okay, and we're painting over Sharpie marker, the Sharpie marker isn't going to move. When we use the marker to make the lines, when we paint over it with watercolor, the lines will stay, okay? And that's why we're using that. That's why we need a Sharpie marker, not our regular Crayola watercolor markers. So we don't want to be using the black marker like this if you have like your crazy art or your watercolor markers, because when you paint over it, the paint will move the black, and we want the black outline to stay. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. You can either use a pencil to draw your lines first and then go over it with a marker. Miss Kai is just going to go ahead and use her Sharpie marker, and I'm going to draw the tree trunk, which goes whoop, okay, a tree trunk, whoop. That's two lines. Okay, maybe in the middle of my paper, I start my line and I pull it down to the edge of the paper and I curve it to give it its roots. Okay, so these are called parallel lines. They're kind of, they're right next to each other and they're going in the same direction and then they go out. Okay, so that's the bottom of my tree. I want it, so I have an example. I want it to kind of look like this in the end. All right, so I'm starting with my trunk. So I have a picture in my head of what I want it to look like. And then I'm going to just switch over. So my trunk is the thickest part. And make that line look a little thicker with this marker here. We can use different kinds of lines. You can look at the other slide on your seesaw for examples of kinds of lines you can use. Thick lines and thin lines. We're going to be using zigzag lines and spiral patterns today. We're going to be using a lot of different kind of lines, okay? But first let's draw the outline of our tree. So we have the trunk, the part that comes up from the ground. Now I want to draw a bunch of branches that are going to be swirly and spiky, okay? So that's totally up to you. You don't have to copy me, but we are going to go ahead and start filling in our branches. Right, this one I'm going to go around and I'm going to spike it back out. It's going to go up and around. You might want to do loop-de-loops. You might put in some twists and turns. Okay, and I'm just gonna go, that looks awesome. Sometimes I stop and I look at what I'm doing and see if that is where I want to go with my tree. Yeah, I like it. I just keep going on and on. Okay, there's no wrong or right. This is your tree of life. Wow. Does it look exactly like the one that I had drawn before? No, but that's okay. All right? That's okay. I like this tree. This has got some pretty interesting shapes going on. Yes, I do like it. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now, if you notice, this line is very thick, right? Thicker than some other lines that are in my tree. That's all right. That's all right. Okay. Now, if you use your pencil, you're going to want to go ahead and go in with a Sharpie and outline the pencil lines that you've drawn. Because sometimes we like to draw with pencil first and then outline it with marker. I'm going to go back in with my Sharpie. I'm going to straighten out some of my lines. I might want to make some lines thicker, or I might want to round some corners, fix some edges. Okay. If you make variety in your picture, it's more interesting. So sometimes we don't want everything to look exactly the same. So I might make some lines thicker here. Okay, I want to smooth some lines out if I didn't like the way they looked. Okay. And next, I'm going to section my tree. I'm going to section it. So I might want to bring a line up here and section that. So this is a section. Everything in this part will be the same. We'll go over that in just a second. This is a section. See how I'm just kind of cutting my tree into pieces, sectioning it. Okay. Putting some lines in there. Because in just a second, we're going to add patterns. And the way we add patterns, I'm going to show you, is we are going to fill in sections of the tree with different patterns. Okay. There we go. All right, that's looking good. It looks like it has a bunch of different areas, right? Sections. Now, earlier I was thinking, what kind of patterns would I want to put in the different sections of my tree? So we are going to fill these spaces up with patterns, patterns of lines. And I was thinking about using these kind of patterns. Can you see them? I put them on a separate sheet of paper because I wanted to remember what I wanted to use. And if you notice, these patterns are drawn with a finer pen. I'm going to use the small pen to draw these patterns in my tree. Does that make sense? So, I'll give you an example. I want to draw this pattern in this area of my tree. So that is just straight lines like this. So 5, 1, 2, oh, I'm going to use a better pen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm just going to keep on making this pattern. Of lines like that. Okay, can you see that? I'll bring that a little closer. You see that? I'm making all the same patterns, just those lines in that one section. Okay, so I'm gonna all right, I'm gonna go ahead and keep on filling this in, and then something is going to be different in this area. I will choose a different pattern. So maybe I want a zigzag line in this area. So I am going to fill this area with zigzags. Okay, you decide how you want to fill each section of your tree. But each section should have a different pattern. Can you do that, boys and girls? It's going to take some time, okay? So fill each section with a different. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I finished all the different patterns in the different parts of my tree. I might have used the same pattern if you see these lines look the same as these lines, but I never use the same pattern right next to each other. They are all different patterns right next to each other. So these patterns are different than these patterns, and these patterns are different than these patterns. And everything here is drawn with Sharpie marker. So when I start to use my watercolor paint, it will not bleed. That means it will not make these lines move. Okay, so I have some water. I have my paintbrush. I have my paint palette, and I have a paper towel, just in case. Okay? So I'm going to dip my brush in my water, and I'm just going to start with maybe the brown. Okay? I'm going to put some water in the brown. And it's really dry, so I'm going to let the water get my paint nice and wet first. Okay, that's nice. Okay. And I'm going to paint this section. Look at that! Do you see? Because I use Sharpie, and Sharpie is an alcohol-based marker. When I put my watercolor paint on it, it does not make the marker run. That means the marker stays where I drew it. Isn't that cool, boys and girls? Alright, I think I'm going to change colors. I want my tree to have some green in it. So I'm going to make this area green. And just take your time. If you want lighter colors, you use more water. If you want a darker color, you use more paint than water. Okay, wow, how does that look? And we are just gonna fill our whole tree, all the branches, with some color. Wow, that looks awesome. I'm gonna put some red over here. And every time I switch colors, I use my paper towel to clean my brush, and then I dip into the water, and then I start another color. We'll have one of these yellow, some yellow here. That is looking awesome. Wow, look at that. It's a super pretty color. Okay. It's looking great. I'm going to keep going. I think I'll make this area purple. Look at that. Right? Taking my time, showing that I am a quality producer. And wherever there's a different pattern, I change the color. So this section right here is different than this one here. So I change the color so that people know that's a different pattern. Okay. You can use the same colors. That's not a problem. But I don't let the same colors, I don't paint the same color right next to each other. I want people to see the difference. Wow. And when you get it to where you're very happy with it, okay, which I am, I'm very happy with that. And there we go. So in the end, I decided to go ahead and make my background yellow. Okay, I signed my art piece. I wrote my initials and the year. It's 2021. So Miss Kai just wrote her initials and the 21. And And I'm all done. I make sure I did a background. I have my beautiful colors. I have my patterns on the inside with the Sharpie. You can see that. There was some areas where the colors bled out. It's called bled out. That means they were inside this area, but then they came out a little bit. And I'm okay with that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. You can use your paper towels if it's too wet, and you can blot it. Okay, when I do that, if you look, it makes the paint lighter. So if you wanted to stay this very, very vibrant dark yellow, I would just let it dry. If you want to if you want to just dab it with the paper towel, it gives it texture. Okay. It also lightens the color. But that's how we're going to do our tree of life. And if I put it up and someone says, wow, that's really nice. Did you paint that? I can tell them, yes, I painted a tree of life in honor of Arbor Day. So that means that my art is also useful in teaching people about something. All right. And that is how art can be beautiful as well as useful.